Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. And as I say every week, I am a clinical psychologist, neuropsychologist, with about 40 years of experience, and a bunch of that is treating ADHD. Currently, I'm in private practice, and I see about half of my caseload is probably ADHD. I do adults, children, families, the whole shooting match. Mostly at this stage of the game, I'm doing evaluations, and I'm also the father of an ADHD. Well, he's now an adult, so there. Anyway, and as I hasten to add, back in the day, back when I was a young parent, we didn't know much about ADHD. And in fact, honestly, we knew nothing. I went through a whole APA, that's American Psychological Association, approved training program and never once heard ADHD mentioned. Not once. And needless to say, I did not have any courses in ADHD. Then I had this child, and I had to try to figure out what to do with him because I couldn't get a decent evaluation by anybody. And I had friends who had all kinds of fancy postdoctoral training sessions in pediatrics, and supposedly knew all the latest stuff. Guess not. Anyway, so I had to do it myself. Fortunately, when you go to grad school and all that good stuff, you learn a lot about how to train yourself. And so I did a lot of reading and went to a lot of conferences, webinars, the whole shooting match. Actually, not webinars. We didn't have them back in those days. Or if they did, they were in real life instead of on the computer. Anyway, so and now I'm kind of in my area. I'm the guy you go to, but I say that modestly. Okay. Just recently, and this is going to be kind of a touchy subject probably for some people. Just recently, I've been noticing there are a couple of people on the internet who are really disclaiming the whole disability thing as far as ADHD is concerned. They are, well, they're kind of angry about it, it sounds like. And I will admit that it's kind of a two-edged sword sort of situation. ADHD is not your typical disability. Okay? I mean, it is not a huge deficit that means you can't do anything. I mean, some of the most successful people in our society have been ADHDers who have followed their own sense of things and built, big companies and made big changes in the world and, kind of followed their own star, if you will, and did some things that were out of the ordinary. Okay, but those are probably the exception. But at least they show that just having ADHD doesn't mean you can't succeed. I mean, I think the big deal you have to remember, though, is ADHD brains are different. There's a lower level of activation in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that controls attention, focus, all that kind of stuff. And it is it's a big player in being able to pay attention, sit still, be quiet, all those sorts of things. So there are some differences, and they are physiological differences. There's no doubt about them. The question is, what makes them a disability. And I would hypothesize, or posit, if you will, that what makes it a disability is that they have to go, when they're very young, to a school environment that is designed for compliant neurotypicals, for kids with brains that don't metabolize dopamine at an incredible rate, and therefore can sit still, pay attention for increasing hours without any release through a recess or any of that kind of stuff. That's where we're going. We are designing that school system, and increasingly it's gotten worse and worse because our people, lawyers are wonderful people if you have to go to court, that kind of stuff, give you good advice about mortgages and but they don't know everything, and they are not always aware that they don't know everything, and they keep making decisions in state legislatures about how school systems are supposed to be run. And what we get is the idea that more is always better. More studying, more homework, less recess, more class time. And it is foolish. And it doesn't take into account the way the brain really works. Okay? You can throw stuff into your brain for a while, but then you need to have some time where it can organize and concentrate the information and store it away the way it needs to be stored if they're ever going to use it again. When you just keep pushing it in, it just goes away really fast. It's not there. You haven't done the necessary to have really learned it. You haven't even done the necessary to memorize it. And I don't know how to change that in school systems. And I think, a large part of the other part of the problem is probably the ease of doing homework. Now, granted, I went to school a long time ago, but my teacher had to type or get typed on a a mimeographable paper, so she could make copies if she wanted to hand it out to the class. Nowadays, all you have to do is push a button on your computer, and you've got endless copies. And so we're seeing. I've seen first graders who have 2 hours of homework every night. That is, that is extremely absurd. But that's kind of the way we're going. But what that does, what school does, that's become just sit down and pay attention, do your work, do it on time, get your assignments in on time. And that has become as important as being able to think. That's a problem for an ADHDer. ADHDers have troubles with just blind compliance. If they see the reason, they'll do okay. But if they don't see the reason, and it's nothing they instinctively like, they're going to have a hard time doing it. They're probably not going to do it very well, which is frequently what happens. Okay? And that's where being diagnosed as a disability is helpful, because you can get accommodations that make it a little less stressful to an ADHD child. Okay? And that, it's not the best system, but I don't see us starting ADHD schools anytime soon. There are some out there, but they're private, and it's it's a totally different model of education. But if for most of us, paying for private school starting in kindergarten or first grade is beyond our reach. And so that's not a reasonable solution. And we're paying, parents of ADHD kids are paying the same taxes as folks who have neurotypical kids. So they're not going to be real happy about if they want to get what they need for their child is to send them to private school. And who knows whether that's really the best thing anyway. But without accommodations, an ADHDer is going to have a hard time with school, generally, okay? Some kids, once they get properly medicated, will do just fine in school, and I'm 100% okay with that. But some kids, it's not quite enough, and they get to have accommodations because ADHD is classified as a disability, okay? And so it's not the same as brain damage. You've got to recognize that. It's a difference. It's not that your brain doesn't work. It's not your brain. You're not brain damaged. You're not. That's not the issue. The issue is your brain metabolizes dopamine faster than the other neurotransmitters and faster than neurotypical kids' brains do, and as a result, you have a harder time paying attention, staying focused, controlling impulses, controlling emotions, all those sorts of things. So, except for, that it may ruffle some people's ego, you've got a disability. Well, but if it's not about ego, then practically, you're better off if your child can get accommodations than that he or she can't get accommodations. And I don't think that it would be a wise idea to scrap the whole disability notion and make it so they can't get accommodations. I just don't think that would work out very well for much of anybody. So that's kind of where we are, and it's I know it's a complicated question, no doubt about it, and I know there aren't a lot of easy answers, okay? And and I think most of us, who work in this field are still trying to figure out what's the best way to go with things. I think I talked last week about strategic parenting, which is my particular solution to raising ADHD kids. And I think, it's got a lot of positive things going for it. And I think that it will be helpful to folks. In the future, we will be doing more about making that available to folks. But for right now, you can read the book or not. And the book is called Strategic Parenting. It's available at Amazon. It was a #1 bestseller when we first came out, for which I'm very thankful. I think the deal is that with an ADHD child, it puts a tremendous amount of the load on parents. They have to be sensitive. They have to be aware. They have to be good observers. All kinds of things that, I've got a couple of neurotypical kids. Hey, no problem. Just let them go. Occasionally a little bit, but not even a whole lot of that. And ADHDers are a totally different ball game. You have to be way more careful, and especially watch the negative stuff. Because by and large, with an ADHD child, if they balk at doing something, it's because they don't think they can do it. And sometimes they're right. They can't do it. And that doesn't mean that they can't learn to do it, and that you can't train them how to do it. But when they're objecting off the top, a lot of times it is just that they are pretty aware that they can't do what you or the school or the teacher, whatever, is asking them to do. So that's probably the number one thing you have to be aware of, because ADHDers in the proper environment they're fun to be around. They've got a lot of energy. They usually have good senses of humor. They'll make you laugh. And they usually have pretty good social skills. But boy, when it's about school, that is a real loaded issue for them. Hopefully there's one or two subjects that they really like, but failing that, it's going to be a long slog. But we have to do it, and till we come up with different options. Okay, this has been hopefully it's kind of informative, because you hear this all the time. It's not a disability, it's a difference. Well, sure. But what's the practical implication of that? Deal is, you've got something that you have to learn to work with, and you have to learn to compensate for it, and you keep that in mind. It's like being a short basketball player, you just have to make do and make the best of what you got. Okay, that's me for this week. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. I'm a clinical psychologist. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, and it is a show designed to make the world safe for ADHD, because ADHDers are outside the box thinkers, and we need those, because those are the folks who come up with the big solutions to the world's problems. They think outside the box. They see solutions other people don't see. And they've already made a lot of differences in the way we live and work. So encourage that. Your child may be the one that's going to solve a big problem in the world. And if 2020 hasn't shown you anything else, it shows you that we have a lot of problems in this world. Okay, that's me for this week. My website is terrygingrasphd.com, and you can ask me questions somewhere around here, down below, I think. And if you have any suggestions for things you'd like to see covered, I'd appreciate it. Okay, thank you, and see you next week.